Hi everyone, my name is Hanny Allston and I'm the business owner of Find Your Feet, and I'm also a distance and ultra running coach. Recently I've been very fortunate to watch a number of athletes racing and preparing for this CBR 100 kilometre event up here in Canberra. And this is a flow-on effect from having coached in the sport of ultra and distance running for around the last 6 years. So what I thought I wanted to do today was to highlight what I think are some of the key areas that you could identify and work on to help you to prepare to race and then to perform optimally. What I'm going to cover in this very short presentation today is going through the different and significant race milestones that athletes go through when it comes to performance. And that is in the time leading up to the event, both in the week before and the days before. Then what to do on the day before, and then flowing into the morning of, during the race, and what you do afterwards to ensure that you recover fast enough. So I'm going to start off with, some ideas that you could identify and work on in that period leading up to race day. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is based on the experiences that I've seen, having been watching from the sidelines a number of distance ultra events, and also what I've identified as an athlete racing in these events myself. And the first area I wanted to touch on was the importance of having the right pack, and a pack that actually fits you. I see a number of athletes battling away with packs that are not designed for running in. Maybe they don't do up tight enough, they bounce, they're too big for the distance that you're completing. And what this just leads to is basically discomfort. So just a couple of tips here is that if you are preparing for those events where there is a lot of mandatory gear, like a 100 kilometre event, then you do really need to have a pack that is around that 10 to 12 litres of volume, especially those events that have a lot of mandatory gear like the North Face 100 or the Cradle Mountain Ultra Distance 82 kilometre event. So those events that are self-supported. However, if you're competing in a 50 kilometre event, then a 5 to 10 litre vest pack normally will do the trick. All you really need to be thinking about when you're selecting a pack too is, are you someone who uses bottles? So we now use these soft bottles, ones that don't slosh around, or are you someone that prefers to have a bladder integrated into the pack? Now, personally, I use bottles because I can see how much I've been drinking. However, some athletes find the convenience of a bladder much, much more preferred. It is also important that when you're selecting these packs to make sure that you get the right size. Most brands these days come in a size range of extra small, small, medium, large, and then large up to extra large. So make sure that you're not just borrowing someone's pack and not thinking about, does this pack actually fit me and does it do up tight enough? And it is important to get those packs early enough so that by the time you get to the week before, you're not trying anything new. But in that week before, it is important that about 7 days out you complete your last longer run. And this isn't ever your longest run, it's just the last of the longer runs that you're going to do. And ideally for me and my athletes that I help, this run should really be no longer than 90 minutes in order not to carry fatigue through into the last week of training. In the last 3 to 7 days out from your event, this is the time where your body's doing the most recovery. So increasing your protein intake and including the 3 Fs, the fiber, fluids, and healthy fats, will all help the body to be recovering. And obviously during this time, sleep is really, really important. 5 to 6 days out is about the time to get a massage. If you leave it any too close to race day, or so any sooner than that, then there's a chance that you may feel lethargic, pull up a little bit sore, and it'll actually decrease performance. And I do see a lot of athletes getting very, very stressed in this week before. I mean, I'm definitely a culprit for this, but it is important, if possible, to let those urgent things wait until the next week. And I mean, who's ever known the world not to wake up the next day, even if that last thing doesn't get done? And during this week, it is important to be reducing the volume dramatically. And I think one error that I see a lot of athletes make is that they also decrease the quality. But increasing the quality of your training over very short distances like 1 minute efforts will make you feel sharper and a little bit more sprightly and bouncy come race day. So I normally include a session of 10 by 1 minute hard easy efforts, where the heart is strong. It's not sprinting by any stretch of the imagination, but it's strong and relaxed and it makes you feel strong and sprightly. And I do this about 3 and 5 days out from the competition. And then in the last couple of days before, it is important to include a rest day. For me and my athletes, we've identified that having a rest day right the day before an event just doesn't work. And the reasoning for this is that could leave you with a spate of around 48 hours where you actually haven't been doing anything. And when your body's become adjusted to training and moving around a lot, having 48 hours leading up into the race might just make you feel lethargic and sluggish. So we include that rest day 2 days out. From here on in, it's really important to be sipping the electrolytes and building up a reserve of hydration and electrolytes in the body, and especially true if you're going to be travelling or in air-conditioned work environments. In this time, it's also important to start backing off your protein and fibre so that you do not carry a risk of these things in your gut system leading on to race day that could cause havoc. And in battle to that, it is important to be increasing the carbohydrates so that you have enough of glucose reserves built up in your glycogen stores so that your brain can access this come race day. Because the brain, after all, is a glucose burner. It absolutely needs these glucose molecules to function optimally come race day. And I don't leave preparing my gear till the last day. I do it a couple of days out. Therefore, if there's any mishaps, you know that you still have time. And on that, I see and I have seen recently a lot of people with bags overflowing and packed poorly. And what this will do is create great discomfort and a lot of bouncing around on your back while you're competing. So I package everything up into clear bags where I can easily see snap block bags where I can easily see where everything is, and I try to make sure that I have everything that I want access to, especially my nutrition, on the front of me so I don't actually have to stop and take that pack off. And of course, it's also really important to try to keep the weight low down in the pack. So put your heavy things in the bottom and the lighter things in the top, and that'll help to stop that bouncing effect on your bag. Hair ties are great as well. You can wrap them around things to pack everything down really, really small. And yes, use those Ziploc bags to compress everything down. Okay, so the day before, obviously, is when things get really important. If you have a very stressful day this day, it obviously will be a fatigue that you may carry into the race day the next day. I like to start the day on a good note, so I get up in the morning and head out the door for 15-20 minutes of jogging, and included in that time I do some 20-second strides or efforts that are just a little bit quicker than race pace. So they're not sprinting, but they just help to get the legs firing. I make sure I recover completely in between each 20-second effort. I then like to come home and just have a hot shower and a stretch. It just makes your body feel relaxed and ready for the day. And then it's straight on to breakfast, making sure you get that fuel in as quickly as possible. And perhaps it's great to, whilst you are focusing on a carbohydrate intake at this time, to include a small amount of healthy fats and protein just to make sure that you do feel full through the day, but not too much that you're likely to carry this into the race the next day. I think the main meal of this day needs to be at lunchtime so that your body actually has time to digest and process this food and give you that energy come race day the next day. So this is when you can have that bigger meal of carbohydrates such as fried rice, pasta and low fibre veggies, but do avoid too much protein at this time. Then later in the afternoon, I head back out the door for another jog. This one is just more to keep me relaxed mentally and to make me feel ready for the evening where I want to put my feet up, get into bed early and get a good night's sleep. Sometimes if you don't do this, you carry an anxiousness through to bedtime and you end up not sleeping very well. I think it's important to have a light dinner too. Evidence all shows that you sleep better when you don't go to bed too full, and obviously anything that you're eating at dinner time is probably not going to be ready for you from an energy availability perspective come race start the next day. So something light like pumpkin soup and bread is always a winner. And obviously keep sipping those electrolytes and avoiding too much refined sugar and caffeine, which act as stimulants. Now for race day. Try not to get up too early. You see people getting up 3-4 hours before an event, but when the event starts at 6, 7, 8 in the morning, you don't need to get up that early, and it's only going to give you a limited amount of sleep. If you have something really light for breakfast like crumpets and honey or a couple of energy bars, then you really don't need to be too concerned about having all of this floating around in your tummy. And my trick is an energy bar, which I can even be munching away on right up until when I'm warming up. And that's something that I use in the race itself as well, so it's no different to eating during the race. Just don't go overboard, low fibre, low protein. I prep my feet, and I'll show you a slide in a moment to help you identify the best way to prepare your feet. But through the morning I sip my electrolytes, do a light jog 20 minutes before the event with a few efforts in it just to kind of get me zipping. And then 10 minutes before the race I take a non-caffeinated gel just to kind of top up the energy that I've burnt through my warm-up, my nerves and any anxiousness that I'm carrying around. To prevent my blisters, I apply a small amount of Fix Mol, which is the white tape you put under strapping tape to prevent allergies. And then over this I lather a nice thick layer of Vaseline. And then I pull a merino sock on, which I find is a very, very breathable sock. But you can also use something like a Cool Max sock, which is well designed to wick moisture off the feet. Try to avoid those ones from Target or the warehouses of the sports world that are just basically a cotton sock. That's going to hold moisture against your skin and likely lead to wrinkling and blisters. It's always good to carry around a few extra merino socks or Cool Max socks in your checkpoint bags, and also a pot of Vaseline, which I actually carry in my vest pack. It's also a fantastic way to prevent chafing. During the race, I think it is important to be fueling your brain and the central nervous system, which is a very, very glucose-dominant organ. So gels really are one of the best forms of energy, and I've given many, many talks on this topic, and if you want to know more, you can go and listen to some more of my podcasts or read some of my articles. But putting something energy dense in every 30 to 45 minutes is fantastic. It's also important to sip electrolytes, and personally I find the Shots brand the best one for this, and to only eat small amounts of solids just to keep you content and away from hunger. And for me, I find the checkpoints is a great place to do this when my effort is lower and it's easier to eat. If you're not sure how frequently to eat, this is a little bit of a general rule, but a larger person or a lower efficiency runner might need to be eating as often as every 30 minutes, while sometimes the smaller people with a higher energy efficiency can avoid or get away with needing food every 40 to 45 minutes. So that's just a little bit of a rule if you don't know, but obviously you want to practice this in your training. My personal strategy is I eat every 30 minutes. I just seem to be someone who burns energy, and I generally go on the form of a gel, and then half an energy bar, and all the time sipping electrolytes as my main hydration. I don't drink water to hydrate, I just use electrolytes, because this is what I'm losing the most of. I think it's important to avoid proteins and fats and not mixing the food around too much. And I only use caffeine right at the end because it's a stimulant and not an energy. Now, some of the distresses that I've seen a lot of over the last little while I've been watching these events are listed here, and I'm just going to go through them quickly because I think a lot of people experience symptoms and they don't know what to do about them. My experience has been that most issues come back to your hydration and how much volume you're trying to put into your little tummy. Because your tummy, after all, is only the size of a fist when it's like your hand when it's in a fist size. So the first issue I see is a lot of bloated, full-feeling tummies. And the ones that gurgle around and sound like a horse's stomach sometimes when it's running along. And often you can run next to a friend and hear their tummy gurgling, and that's a sign of bloatedness or a full tummy. And to me, it just would say that you're not absorbing the fluids and the volume of fluids or volume of food that you're putting into your tummy. So what I would be suggesting in this scenario is try increasing the amount of sodium in your electrolyte by increasing that electrolyte in the fluid, or try decreasing the amount of volume that you're consuming because maybe you've been drinking more than your stomach can tolerate. If you've been having a headachy or dizzy feeling, this could be too little volume or too little sodium and a sign that you actually haven't drunk enough and are becoming dehydrated. And this is especially true too if you become overly hot or cold and clammy and you actually stop sweating. So if you've stopped sweating, to me that's often a sign, given, if it's a hot day, if you've stopped sweating, it would be a sign that you're entering a phase of dehydration. And any negative thoughts, clumsiness, or staring out into space and realising that you haven't actually seen anything for the last few kilometres, to me is a sign of low glucose levels, and it's time to really begin working on getting enough energy to your central nervous system and your brain. So take a gel or something at least that has pure glucose in it. And I'm constantly monitoring these things all the time, and I think any support crew should be doing the same. So monitor your feet and any chafing, apply more Fixamol or Vaseline or change your socks over if required. If those negative thoughts and clumsiness are kicking in, take a gel, or if you can't swallow it, just swirl it around in your mouth and use the oral mucosa pathways to the brain instead. Try not to get too far ahead of yourself. Focus on the situation that you're in at this point. Focus on getting to the next checkpoint, and don't think that, oh my goodness, I still have 50 kilometres left to go. It is doable if you break it down into chunks. Don't let yourself get too hot. I think this is an error that I've seen a lot of recently. Think about cooling yourself down with water or taking off a layer, especially on those mornings, such as up in the Ultra Trail Australia events where you're starting at 6 a.m. in winter and people have way too many clothes on thinking they're going to get cold, and actually they get too hot and they set off a stress response too early on in the event. And keep checking in with yourself and your mood. Mood, I think, is the best gauge of nutritional status. The people that bounce along into a checkpoint, their eyes are sparkling, they're bright and they're chirpy, they're obviously getting it right. The grumpy ones, the ones staring off into space, the ones that are slightly clumsy or anxious or irritable, you can tell that their nutrition has started to go out the window. Chafing, wet wipes are fantastic. Putting on a little bit of Fixamol and adding some Vaseline to the area. There's a very, very simple solution to avoiding chafing. And also I find that under a vest pack, it's great to wear a t-shirt. If things are getting a bit uncomfortable, we do see that people are trying to use drugs basically to dumb down the pain. But if you do need to use this, then please only use Panadol. Do not take anything like a Nurofen, ibuprofen or Voltaren, so an anti-inflammatory that might be given to you, because these have a very strong effect on the kidney and the liver, especially when you are dehydrated, and it can actually be very, very dangerous. My rule is that if it is worse than Panadol, then you really should not be continuing in the event. So please think very carefully about what you put into your mouth when you're racing and what's been given to you by an outside source. So there were a few tricks for race day, and I think those things really, if you keep monitoring them, you can keep yourself in a great place. But after the event, sometimes I see people come across the line, sit on a chair, and then you can imagine it continues on into the night and into the week to come, and that would just leave you feeling stiff and heavy and probably pull up more sore than you need to. So keep walking around gently if you can, even if it's just walking to the bathroom, getting up, getting changed, sitting down, getting up again to greet someone. That sort of movement is all you need to be doing. It's important to eat a light meal, or if you can't eat, sip a sweetened liquid such as tea with honey straight away so that you can start your rehydration and refueling strategies. And as soon as you can and feel able to stomach it, then to move into a small volume, nutrient-dense meal, and especially including that little bit of protein, just drip feeding it into you so that your muscles have something to begin repairing on. Sip those electrolytes, well after the event. You're going to keep sweating, your body is still going to be depleted because you can never replace everything that you lose during the event. So continuing that rehydration process until your urine is clear and frequent and strong is very, very important. It's important too in the week afterwards to just keep moving around. You might not be training, but going for a light swim, sitting on an exercise bike, going for a walk will keep you feeling fresher. And don't expect to get a very good night's sleep after the event. I think we all fall into this trap of going, oh, I'm so tired, I'm going to sleep brilliantly. But sadly, evidence shows that none of us do. And I think it's just that your body is really fighting hard to begin the repair process. And my final tip is to avoid anti-inflammatories in this time, no matter how sore you are. The inflammatory process is there as a protective mechanism for the body and to begin the healing processes. So if you're popping anti-inflammatories, you're just going to slow the healing process down. When you feel ready to, it is great to return to training, but this should be a gradual onset of training build-up rather than a blunt back into training time. And take your time, don't rush this point. It's important to kind of have downtime after an event to both physically and emotionally pick yourself up again, especially if it was one of your A races which you've been striving hard for months on end. It is also a great opportunity to think about your event, think about your training and your build up to the event, and to identify any weaknesses that you might have. For example, do you have a muscle imbalance? Do you actually need to work on stretching or lengthening muscle fibers? Do you actually just need to go back to basics and do some base training again? I think this phase is really important to start the rehabilitation process and in a way that you feel is sustainable and that you can continue on with. Just as a tip, my experience of coaching athletes is that after big 100-kilometre events where an athlete has really applied themselves, it's at least 1 month to build back to full training, and those would be the more elite athletes in the field. Even a 10-kilometre athlete, when they race that distance at maximal speed, will take about 1 week to get back to full training again. And that's a great rule that I keep in the back of my head, is that for every 10 kilometres that I race at maximal intensity, somewhat above half marathon or marathon pace, it generally is the equivalent of 1 week recovery. So a marathon runner is often not returning to training for at least a month. But you don't have to sit on the couch. Through this time, use active and passive recovery strategies to get you back onto your feet. By passive, I mean things like massage, alternative therapies, and things where you're resting. Active recovery are the activities that are about movement without training. So things like swimming and yoga, sitting on an exercise bike gently, you would identify as an active process. And I guess my last tip of all is don't over race. You see lots of people coming off the adrenaline high of a race going, yeah, what's next? But don't rush this process. And avoid doing too many races during a year, because racing will disrupt, as you can hear, your ability to prepare for events and will give you a large requirement for recovery afterwards. So if you're bouncing from one event to the next, you're either not recovering properly or you're not training properly. So pick your battles, give yourself time off the back of them to recover, and then you can get into it very, very smart again. If you have any questions, we're always here to help it find your feet, and we also have an extensive source of gear that will get you out there into these wild spaces and performing at your optimum. You can have a look at my blog. I've got many articles on many topics on the blog, and also we'll be building on these videos and sources. You can follow us on social media, sign up to our newsletter where we share a lot of our knowledge, and hopefully we'll see you out there on one of our running tours or an event very, very soon. Best wishes.